Hello, everyone, and welcome again. My name's Delane, and I'm one of the Mercredan team, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all today to bring in some of the post-death questions that we didn't get time to do last week and cover near-death experiences and more. So I look forward to bringing you all the information about that today with Mercredan. Frances is in the background getting ready to bring Mercredan through to us today. And what we would love you to do is please like our video and click on our subscribe if you haven't already. And then we can continue to provide this sort of content. So when you're ready, Frances, we look forward to speaking with Mercredan today. Over to you.
Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. Reality is defined by time and space. One considers a location in space, and there is never any doubt that one location exists, even if one is not at that point. So across your planet, everyone has a location, and the location is different to others. And location in this sense, then, is infinite in the universe. And yet you consider time as if it is a thread. But time is equal to space. Time spans out in all directions, just as space does. So there is, shall we call it, a time location that exists just as easily as space location in that sense. Enough for us to begin our conversation.
Thank you, Mercredan. When our loved ones pass over, what happens to their unlearned lessons?
The question then is one loses the sense of location. When someone leaves the physical domain, one's physical body remains in a location. And yet the perceptive realm continues onward. So shall we say, then time takes on a different aspect. So it is important to recognize the physical body is no longer the location of consciousness for that specific focus. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the physical body takes a period of time in which to disintegrate, to break down, and to return its elements back to the, shall we say, the resource part. The emotional body, however, continues on with a focal point. So shall we say, the person who passes over recognizes they no longer are limited by the physical dimensions. Now they can explore in other realms of time and space. You understand? So the first thing that becomes relevant is what has been acknowledged, what one has experienced, and what, shall we say, emotional content and connections are left behind. So then such elements are often the addictions and attractions and desires and resistances. They are all components within the emotional realm. So shall we say then, for some people, they are continue to be connected to the physical dimension of which they are not part of. So they hang around those that are grieving and in often cases try to project, shall we say, messages in, say, shall we call it the emotional field of influence. So then, of course, there are people who can read their emotional tones. And so the message can, in some extent, be conveyed. Over time, the connection to attractions and addictions most often dissolves away. The point of focus is no longer attracted to that realm, and the emotional body dissolves just as rapidly as the physical. One then arrives as a focal point in the, shall we call it, the intellectual body, the body of mind and ideas, and one begins to understand the principles of how one created one's experience with the ideas and the attitudes and the perceptions, distortions, and so on that created the life one was engaged in. You understand? So, shall we say then, reviewing the lessons from that point of view, one begins to understand how events are manufactured and manifested. At this point, then, shall we say, one reviews the entirety of one's position in the overall complexity of consciousness. As those ideas that were held begin to dissipate, so the intellectual body also dissolves away. Then one awakens only as a focus point within consciousness. Does that make some sort of sense? So shall we say then, to answer the question, the lessons are continued to be discovered as each of the focal bodies resign their position, and one begins to integrate the lessons that were chosen to explore.
Okay. Thank you. So does that mean that once those lessons are integrated in that form, in the last vestiges of, you know, the intellectual body and things like that, do we, not as our old focal point, but in a new way, go back to the same family in a different form at any point?
Often, as a perspective, remember that one is not as such reborn. The focus point in consciousness integrates with the whole. So a new focus point carrying, shall we say, some aspects of connection can occur, and one awakens in the resonant field of a new dimension. With it is difficult to describe such a conglomerate without attempting to describe it in terms of reincarnation. Do you understand? So if we were to point out one reintegrates, or one is comes into a family as if it is such a position, that one is reincarnated together in a family condition. Do you understand? That makes it simple to understand, yet it does not completely describe what occurs within consciousness. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes. So can you describe it in consciousness as well?
Fields of influence within fields of influence. You understand what should suggest then that energy attracts itself to similarities. So shall we say a family constellation is a field in consciousness, a field of influence. Consciousness, shall we say, is accumulating together, much like a galaxy, a constellation, and so on, bring together many forms to occupy a certain location in time and space. So shall we then say that as a unit of perception accumulates others of similar modality, similar attentions, come together to re-manifest in a group consciousness, a group field of influence of which they are choosing to operate. In other words, sometimes the family dynamic, the constellation, has to be reorganized. So what was once, shall we say, the controlling factor, maybe the father of a family, can then take on a different role in order to work within that field of influence. Does this make some sort of sense?
Yes.
You understand, things accumulate around attractive points. This can be demonstrated in many other ways. You already understand that crystallization of form takes place around a specific point of contact. This is a natural phenomenon within the physical, emotional, mental, and conscious fields. It is, shall we say, a cosmic truth. And that is why you have stars and galaxies and planets and so forth, all accumulated around particular energetic points.
Okay, thank you. So when we're incarnated, is it easy to create these past lives or these past resonances through imagination in such a setting? Or is it actually helping people accurately recall and heal historic resonances?
Let's say this. As the intellectual body disintegrates, sometimes, or maybe even often, certain points of consciousness, certain trials, shall we say, seem rather unfinished. And so that causes a charge within the greater field of consciousness, and that attracts into other fields with similar evidence. In other words, an opposite charge will attract, so that someone who wants to experience a certain character can be attracted to someone who wants to host such a character. Then one would choose one's parents as the host for such an experiential reality. So one is creating the component field in which to explore one's characteristics. And this explains, how we say, why each individual point of focus comes in with a certain set of characteristics that they are attempting or desiring to explore, including, shall we say, the sort of relationship to the parents, or as I prefer to call it, the host. Does that explain it at all?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So, as consciousness expressed in a certain focal point, do we ever learn all the lessons and never return to Earth frequency?
Of course, because while the physical is a certain limited framework, the emotional field within the emotional body free of physicality has much more freedom to explore. And so after, shall we say, one has finished with the limitations of physicality, one most often, if not always, consciousness is spreading itself within that emotional location, that emotional, I want to say emotion, it is rather better to call it the astral fields or astral planes, or what they used to call the Elysian fields. So one could explore it as if it is more of a limitless dream. The physical world, of course, is still just a dream, but it has set times, location. That is, one only comes in for a period of exploration. This means that the physical plane within the limits of the time location hosts only a certain numbers of focal points, of interactions is the better way of putting it, fields of influence. But over the period of and the extension of time, all physical realities are experienced in a singularity. That is because all things are one. At all points, all things are one. So all lifetimes are located in the span of time. That is in a plane, shall we say, that is as much like a space location, but it is a time location.
Okay, thank you.
I am trying to make this as simple as possible, you understand, yet it is complex only from a location where such thought processes are not commonality. In other words, if one begins to be aware of, shall we say, the higher degrees of science that has been explored, you will find many who can truly understand the principles as described, not just that, but also begin to understand the fundamental laws that apply. Humankind is arriving at such a level of consciousness that once that has been clarified and accepted as the valid description of physical reality, humankind will then begin to be, shall we say, released from its underlying restrictions, because humankind then begins to realize that the physical world is just a place of operation to explore the astral fields. That is, to have a solid basis of trial and error, that is, a solid place in which, shall we say, actions and responses come together. As soon as that has been perceived, humanity begins to recognize that every thought and action has an effect in the greater fields, the greater expansion of time. In other words, one cannot escape oneself. One cannot escape what one has activated. So karma as such does not require another lifetime in a physical location. It is immediately experienced as an emotional response. Do you understand? So people are waking up to their reactions to their behaviors in time and space.
Thank you. So, on to our near-death questions. So, why is it that some people experience near-death experiences and don't completely die? And is this about learning something for them?
Of course. The near-death experience is when someone wakes up in the astral fields and sees their physicality laid out beneath them. They see their actions and behaviors as if it is a laid out story of a life. And as such, most, if not all, review their behavioral qualities and return not as the same person at all, but as an entirely changed being with different approaches. So one can often engage with other qualities that one has touched on within the astral field. In other words, because there are less, if not almost no, locational limitations, one can often understand and see other physical realities. In other words, one can merge with other life appearances. Let us take a simple case. If one, shall we say, is not, has carried a certain set of beliefs about a cultural difference, different peoples of a different race. In other words, one is racist, and one has such an experience of arriving in the astral field and begins to be attracted to explore what such another race is actually like, then they might perceive that being, that family quality, that racial quality, and review their own perceptions, their own choices, so that when they return, they are no longer holding such views. It is what you would say, they come back with a change of heart. The change of heart is because this is the astral emotional resonant field. So when they return, they indeed come back with a different heart field.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mercredan. Is there anything else you'd like to add today?
As always, your questions are enough to provide, shall we say, an intense sequence of description. So let us leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again for your attention, for your interest, and for the interest of all who are listening and considering how this affects their personal approach to life. So thank you and goodbye.
Okay, so thank you everyone so much for your open mind and curiosity to contemplate what's being offered here today. If you enjoyed today's session, please like our video and subscribe if you haven't already. And we felt so much appreciation from our community since we started doing this, so thank you so much. Please join us next time in 7 days when I will be here again on the Friday New Zealand time. And for now, enjoy your week and Easter period if you experience that. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye-bye.